Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Chats with Kat on the Voice of Adoptees podcast. I am your host, Kat, and I hope everyone is having a great week so far. Don't forget to grab your coffee, tea, or a preferred beverage and settle on in. I would like to place a disclaimer, a content warning for this episode. We will be discussing themes of mental health and potentially abuse. If these are themes that are difficult for you to listen to, please click away to a different episode and take care of yourselves. Remember, you matter. I am currently here with James, who is a MA screenwriting student. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
James, please introduce yourself for our audience. Your name, where you're from, and a little fun fact about yourself.
So thank you very much. So I'm James Evans. I am from the UK, specifically Wales, which is a nation like Scotland and England, and it has its own capital city, which is Cardiff. And it has its own language and culture. And I was born in Swansea, and I currently live in Cardiff. I'll get a little bit more into that and sort of why I moved. But yeah, that, and a little fun fact about me is that I'm a massive Doctor Who fan.
Oh, very nice. I love that. Okay, so let's get right into it. What is your connection to adoption? What's your story?
Yeah, so my story begins 2nd of May 2002, which is when I was born, which was in Swansea. And it's sort of, sorry.
You were born in Swansea, right?
Swansea.
So where is that located?
It's about an hour from Cardiff, from the capital city. And yeah, so I was born May 2nd, 2002. And about 2 months after I was born, I was placed into foster care because my birth parents, they weren't able to look after a child. There was domestic abuse in the house. And I think I was exposed to some of that. I'm not, I don't have lots of details, I've only got some details, that's just, that happens, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah, I was exposed to that, and they would fight a lot. And so they went through assessments, and they failed those assessments. And so I was placed into foster care, and I spent about 2 years in foster care. I had 2 foster families for about a year each. I think it was decided in sort of January, February 2003 that they would look for adoptive parents for me, because there was absolutely no way I was going back. The problems were family-wide, and they had to look, I think it is part of the process that they do look if like extended birth family can look after me, can look after the child, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. And so, an adoption was, I guess,
the only option.
Was the only option for me. Yeah, I'm one of the cases where it was the last resort and the only option. I don't want to get more into that because I know how important it is where there's cases where it's not, and it shouldn't be, But yeah, so I spent 2 years in foster care, and it was sort of during my second year in foster care with my second family that I met my adoptive parents. So I was around 1 and a bit years old, and then not long after my second birthday, I was adopted. I moved to Cardiff, the capital city of Wales, and that's where I've lived ever since. My adoption was officiated December 23rd, 2004, and there's a picture of me in family court. And that's sort of my origin story.
Okay, so you have a lot more details than a lot of other adoptees, and I dare to argue that this is clearly something that is very prevalent for you. It's very important to you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's really important to have, information and details from the beginning, from the start, because if you don't, that's just a massive deception,
Right.
Unfortunately, you hear cases where, you know, like children weren't told of their adoption until they were like older, and that'd
Right.
be a massive shock. And so, yeah, like my parents always were open to me about being adopted. Obviously,
Okay.
I always had that room to talk about it. Obviously, there was never any sort of, making me feel like, you know, I owed them anything for that. Yeah, there was never
Wow.
sort of any
Yeah.
gaslighting or anything. It was, I've had a mostly happy adoption. There have been
Mm.
negatives, but that's not mainly to do with that. I mean, that's not really to do with my parents or their parenting ability. They have been really great parents to me. And I guess I consider myself lucky because I could have ended up with narcissists. And I know that does happen, unfortunately. And, it frustrates me that people like that adopt,
Right.
It's awful. But yeah, it's been a wild ride. Yeah, being adopted
It's a lot.
is a lot. It's definitely a lot, and it's so
Yeah.
much to process and understand. And yes, a sort of so kind of to go into a bit more about sort of what wasn't necessarily positive about my adoption,
Sure.
that there wasn't a lot of support, like post-adoption support when I was adopted. And so my parents didn't have like the resources and the trauma-informed training
Okay.
to be able to sort of like deal and like understand maybe why I take things certain ways. So for example, I've always found raised voices quite triggering, and
Yes,
that's
me
always
as
been
well.
quite difficult for me. I always get really defensive and quite
Yes.
angry when people shout at me, especially my
Yes.
parents. And so, because they didn't have any support for that, that kind of led down a path, especially with my dad, my adoptive dad. We've had a little bit of a tricky relationship, but it's because of that
Mhm.
lack of support and getting stuck in that cycle that we've sort of like become lost in that, and we don't really know sort of why we're getting, sort of angry at each other anymore, if you get what I mean. But yeah, it's got nothing to do with him or me. It's that lack of those lack of resource and that lack of help in that area.
So when you say, I'll pull from my own experience for a moment because I understand like what you're saying when you speak of your dad, your adoptive dad. I felt that way about my adoptive mom. We definitely did not utilize any sort of resources. So I assume that there's a large feeling of like misunderstanding, not feeling heard. Maybe you feel like you're shutting down sort of thing. And I actually meant to ask you about if there were any sort of resources, if you knew, for your biological family and whether or not you feel like that was also a problem because you're going into the post adoption stuff. And do you feel that if there were resources for your biological family, if that could have potentially helped them?
I'm actually not sure. That's not something I've really thought about.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think having looked at my files and sort of understanding the kind of people they were, I know that they never would have been able to look after me, even if they'd had help. But yeah, no, I just like I don't wish them any bad, if you get what I mean. I know
No, of
they
course.
did expose me to stuff that they shouldn't have, and they have caused damage, unfortunately. But like, yeah, no, I do wish that they. I'm not sure if they even had help after, being put into foster
Right.
care. I believe they did. If think on the top of my head, I think they might have had help. I know they did. Yeah, so like about a month after I was born, me and my birth parents went to this sort of parent and baby unit,
Okay.
and they did have, they were, they, like, I guess they did try to have, they were, sorry, cannot, they were given support and they did try to get help.
Mhm.
That didn't work out, obviously. But yeah, that's a really interesting question. Yeah.
I think I guess I'm asking it because there's a correlation for me. Many adoptees call for the complete disrailment and the really just the complete cease of adoption. And they always argue kinship adoption. And when you mentioned about how your whole family would not have been able to adopt you, it's the last resort, I found that was very interesting. Now, when you talked about resources, it also made me wonder, you felt that there weren't resources for you after the fact through growing up through your adoption, and I wondered if there was like that also for the biological family, and how important maybe different resources would be for the biological family if they had gotten involved, and if naturally if you felt that that could have maybe changed anything. I feel that the answer I'm receiving is from what you're trying to explain is it may not have made a difference, and you still may have been adopted regardless,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, my adoption sort of had nothing to do with being removed from my birth family because, I was in foster care. And I think
Right.
even if I hadn't been adopted, I still would have been in foster care and could have, aged out of the system. And so, yeah, I think that because I know I did have contact with my birth mother
Oh, okay.
across
Yeah.
the 2 years I was in foster care, and I did have sort of session, like, those sort of supervised visits.
Yeah.
But that sort of happened less and less on her part because she stopped attending and started
Right.
to sort of go away.
Right.
And yeah, my
It's
birth
okay.
dad also, I think he came to the first few and then just left. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a trigger, something that also triggers me very much is when people raise their voices. For me, I don't necessarily realize it. I immediately get defensive and I feel kind of like I have to protect myself in a way. And you're expressing that this is something also that you have gone through with your relationship with maybe people in general, but also like your adoptive father.
Yeah.
And I understand that. Now, I believe you're also saying that there weren't really resources for you. What resources would you have needed during that specific time in your life? Which ones do you think you would have benefited the most from?
I think maybe adoptee groups, adoptee sort of support groups. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, like with the stuff, the resources that they have now. But yeah, back then
Yes.
there weren't any sort of adoptee support groups that I know of. And I think also as well, I think what would have really helped is having like a sort of a therapist maybe or a guidance counselor just to, help me unpack all of these issues because my parents can only, I guess, know so much.
Right.
And I think I would have really benefited from having a professional to talk to. And I'm not saying like every day, just like maybe like once a fortnight or once a
Right.
month or something, like a guide essentially, like an adoptee guide, to sort of have.
Sort of help you
Yeah,
navigate through the things that you're feeling and try to make
yeah,
sense of it.
yeah, exactly. I think that would have been really, really helpful. But NHS and stuff like that over here, it's not perfect, with like government funding and stuff.
Right. And so how was it growing up? So you feel a little isolated at home during this time.
Yeah, I've always felt different, out of place.
Yeah,
I think that's a common
it
thread,
is.
a common theme for adoptees, feeling, I guess, like sort of the other, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah, that kind of affected how I made friendships and relationships. I was always sort of the weird one in my school and the sensitive one. And
Yes.
I found it really difficult to make friendships and to, I guess, sustain them. Yeah, like I've always had abandonment issues. Yeah, that fear of being abandoned, of being rejected by people. That's a common one. I think that's why having support is so important because if you're just left with these feelings, you're just going to sink into them and your mental health is just going to get really bad. And that's
Right.
what's happened with me. But, if I'd had that support, if adoptees have had that if they'd had that support, you know, I
Right.
don't think the suicide rates would be as high as they are, you know, because
Right.
when you're adopted, specifically back then, you know, it was like, well, you know, on you go, there you go, that's it,
Yes.
happy family now, you know, happy
Yes.
ever after. But it's not that, you know, because because it's not this when you have a child, it's not the same when you are when you're adopting a child, because an adopted child is coming with baggage, you know.
Yes. I feel like I've been saying this in a few different episodes of mine where there is a very great psychologist who specifically talks about adoption. And he says that all adoption begins with loss and all loss is trauma.
Mm,
Right. So from the get go, we as adoptees, we experience a trauma through the loss of our biological family. But it's interesting because, in a way, I feel when people come from such tumultuous backgrounds where they know that the entire family is just unable to change in a positive way for the child, then they don't just come from loss of a parent, they come from loss of an entire family
mm.
and loss of the ability to have been cared for by said family.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
feel like it expands to a wider sort of branch.
Mm. And I don't think my family was that big as well. And I know there'd been a history of social services getting involved with my
Right.
birth parents. And yeah, there was absolutely history with both of my birth parents and the police and stuff like
Right.
that. And yeah, it's a lot. It's just it's so weird. Do you have those like epiphany moments where you're like, I'm adopted? It's
Yes.
like it's so weird to be adopted, not in a negative way, but just like
Yeah.
it's like a
It's different.
it's different, you know?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So I want to just touch on something really quick. When it came to your adoptive parents, obviously, like they always made it clear that you were adopted. They're very open about it, which is really wonderful when I hear that in a good way, in a positive way. And like you said, there was no guilt tripping or anything like that. Now, for something that I hear a lot is the notion of I knew I was just different from my adoptive parents. I'm different. Me myself, I am different than them. Did you also feel that way? And I know it's because we are very consciously aware that we are adopted. But I wonder if it was also something that you can look at them and be like, no, I'm totally different than this person. And it's like an obvious thing to you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think I ever like consciously acknowledged that I look different to them. But I think subconsciously, I think it was always there. And
Right.
I've always found, I mean, I love my extended adoptive family. They're brilliant. But I've always
Yeah.
found gatherings quite difficult,
Hard.
and
Yes.
feelings then come up. Are they going to reject me? Are they going to, you know, they're going to reject me? And I take even the slightest sort of, you know, look or
Right.
like emotion from them is rejection. You know, it's really difficult, you know?
Right. Yeah, I totally get that. It was the same way for me with my family. I kind of the way that I describe it is I walked on eggshells all of the time, kind of being very conscious of how I acted, where I was looking, how I was behaving, things I was saying. I had to be much more conscious of that around my extended family. Not I didn't necessarily need to do that around my adoptive parents. It mattered how they viewed me, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, like just like you said, I didn't really feel like I had to do that around my parents. But when it came to
Yeah.
extended family, you get that sort of, I guess, worry, you know. But you know,
Yeah.
no, my all of my uh family are great. Yeah, I love them a lot.
Oh, that makes me really happy to hear. It's a really positive thing because many adoptees don't necessarily have the greatest experience
Mm,
with their extended family. I know I surely don't. I no longer speak to mine. They made it very clear that I was adopted, and you know that in itself is also very triggering. But
I'm sorry. I was going to say, oh, I'm sorry that that's, your experience, because it shouldn't be. And it really angers me that it's like that,
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. I'm sorry to one of you out there that, that have had terrible experiences, you didn't deserve that at all.
I think something important to remember, something that got me through it, one of the few things, is that as I got older, I realized that I couldn't choose who I was living with as family, but I could choose my family, right?
Yeah.
So the people that I surrounded myself with, the people that support me now, they are like family to me. And that makes up for the fact that makes up for the other fact of the other family that I left behind. Because while I left behind my family that didn't appreciate me, I gained a family that did, right? And they're my friends. And I just want to say that it's possible for people to be able to do that, right? Where they will just completely accept you and they will be understanding of you and supportive.
Exactly, yes.
So moving off of that, I would like to get into about some of the resources that we have today, especially over in the UK.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. So yeah,
Yes.
so I read my files back in 2022, and that was an experience. That's where I found out that there was domestic violence, because I didn't know. And to go off a little bit here, we'll come back, don't worry. I'm definitely younger for my age. I have like emotionally, because of the trauma I've been through, and because I have
Right.
autism as well, like sort of 5 years behind, really. And so I know I find, I guess, sort of the more difficult stuff quite sensitive, and I can understand why I wouldn't, at like, 20, 19 years old, why I wouldn't be ready for information like that. And so, yeah, just finding out that had happened, that was a lot. And I've only recently just sort of realised that domestic violence is classed as child abuse as well.
Right.
Yeah, that was a lot to process. But yeah, so going back, sorry,
It's
I've gone
okay.
off a little bit of a trail, but to carry on. At that meeting, I asked about sort of adoption support and about like if there's any youth groups like I go to, and it was about a year later, because obviously COVID had happened and
Right.
everything was kind of starting to come back in 2022. But about a year later, I joined this Welsh adoptee group called Connected, and essentially that has different sort of age groups, and they meet up once a month or twice a month, or once every 2 months or something, and do an activity. And that's been really, really helpful. It's been really, really good to just be able to be with other adoptees and be able to just, that's really helped with, I guess, my sense of belonging, because I'm around other people who know exactly what they go through. Yeah, so definitely that area of support now is a lot better, with youth groups, and also as well, I think also the like post-adoption support is a lot better now in Wales, and I think also the UK as well. That it's still a way to go, but yeah, it's starting to get there. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. When I was over in the UK, I definitely noticed that there are a lot of, well, there's some programs that are trying to come and support the adoptees. It's something that I do feel is newer. Like you said, for us growing up, we didn't really have those resources. They were not allocated to us or our parents, our adoptive parents. And now that there are more resources coming out, I do think that it is good for those who are adopted to try and look for those resources, whether it's in the UK or in America. Something else that's kind of new is, from what I'm noticing, is that there are counselors, psychologists that are specifically for adoptees. That is something that was unheard of when I went. It was always general adoption, or I mean, not general adoption, I'm sorry, general counseling.
Yeah.
So, now I can Google, especially over in the UK, I mean, my boyfriend did it for Glasgow because I said once I moved over to Scotland, I would like to continue therapy. And he was able to just research therapists in Glasgow specifically for adoption. And there's like 6, 7, 10 pages, which is unheard of to me. It was never that way for me growing up. So I think it's absolutely beautiful. And what is one of the benefits that you think group therapy has for adoptees? Like, what was your experience in it? You said it was very positive.
Yeah, I think that it helps with sort of, I guess, that sense of belonging and opening up more, I think, and helping with, I guess, friendships and bonding. It's such a great group to be a part of. And I've made some really good friends from that. And also there's great youth workers as well. Yeah, they're brilliant. Yeah, it's really good.
It's wonderful to hear. Now, so do they give you like different exercises, or like do they I know that they probably give you different exercises, like creative ways to kind of open up, and because not everyone can necessarily open up right away. For some of us, we're more closed off about our experience, our journey, where because of our distrust or because of how many times we've been hurt, because of our different abandonment issues or our identity issues, whatever the case may be for adoptees. What are some of the creative things that you were able to do within the group?
Yeah, so the first sort of event that I went to at Connected was axe throwing, which is really cool. And that was like a really good way to, I guess, release a lot of pent up stuff. Yeah, no, that was really cool. And I think mainly what the group is sort of, getting together, doing something fun. So it's not like a serious sort of sitting down in a circle and talking about our issues. It's more natural than that. It's you can bring it up to other people if you want to.
Right.
Yeah, it's not like forced or anything. And so yeah, it gives you your own space to open up, and the support workers are really, really helpful, and they really help you with that. Yeah.
So were these groups part of the reason that you were able to get into screenwriting and become a screenwriting student? Or is this something that you felt was a release for you during your journey through adoption?
What the release has in screenwriting or the groups?
So I'm just wondering if like you being in the groups has motivated you to pursue screenwriting.
Oh no, that kind of no, I understand. Yeah, that kind of happened before. I've only been a part of Connected for about a year now. But yeah, it was like around 2020 that I started to kind of get into screenwriting, because we were all stuck at home,
Right.
because of lockdown. And I just started, I guess, writing on Word. And I was like, I really, really like this. And then I started to write more. And then I got Final Draft screenwriting software, which is really helpful because it's a pain because you have to format everything on Word. But then obviously Final Draft does it for you.
Yes.
Then I started to do screenwriting courses. There's this thing called BBC Maestro, and you can do this screenwriting course, and it's all videos as well, which is really helpful. And then when I was doing my bachelor's in theatre and drama, there was a module which you could sort of choose between two things, either scriptwriting or acting for camera. I obviously did scriptwriting because that's what I was interested in. And that was really, really fun, and I really, really enjoyed that. And we had to write a 30-page script. And because I really enjoyed that, I wanted to do the MA in screenwriting. And so I'm still doing the MA right now. And I started back in September, and I finished in September this year.
Right.
Which is nervous because that means I'm going out into adult life, and I'm not an adult. I'm absolutely not. Like, I know I'm obviously legally I'm an adult, but just sit up here.
That's so funny. That's something I always say is that people who write, because for me, writing was my escape. Writing, my imagination fueled my life. It's something that I can't tap into at the moment, which I'm not happy about. But it's because of writing that I was able to get through everything that I've been through, because I was able to write about it, right?
Yeah.
So with screenwriting, it brings a whole other element. It's like you say, like, Final Draft does all the formatting for you, but at the end of the day, it's your ideas and your imagination on that paper
Yeah.
in the screenwriting section, right? And so what I think is very unique is how we take the stories that are in our mind and we put it on paper. So what kind of things, what type of screenplays have you worked on, or have you kind of brainstormed about? Like, does it have anything to do with adoption?
Yes, yeah. I have a lot of ideas for adoptee, because there's not a lot of adoptee. I don't think there's really at all any kind of probably adoptee-led shows. So yeah, for example, at the moment, I'm doing my final major project on my MA, and I'm doing, so basically, sorry. So yeah, I'm doing my final major project at the moment, and so we have to either do like episodes or a feature-length film, and it's like 90 to 120 pages.
Yes.
And I've decided to do 3 episodes of a
Okay.
TV series idea that I came up with sort of during that time when I had to decide what I wanted to do for that. And it changed quite a lot, and actually was quite different. And I was originally going to do a film, and it's gone through quite a lot of changes, and it wasn't originally about adoption. And so I finally settled on an idea, and it's sort of a sci-fi drama, and is about an adoptee essentially finding their birth family, and and it's specifically about sort of not knowing where you come from, like foundlings, for example, children who were abandoned and don't know anything at all, and that discovery, of finding who you are. Yeah.
It's a very important journey to write about. So I think your screenplay will be very good, because it's also passionate, right? When we write, we do this thing that we incorporate ourselves into the story.
Yeah.
So that also makes it a very powerful piece.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that, it really, really helps, because I think when non-adoptees write adoptees and adoption themes, it isn't always great, and it isn't always good, and I think it kind of goes into sort of media representation, because
Yes.
I have a big problem with how adoption is represented, because it's very sort of either end, if you get what I mean. It's never really nuanced. It's either the superhero, the perfect sort of squeaky clean, happy ever after kind of thing, or it's on the other end where it's sort of, like, we're broken, damaged, evil, the evil adoptee stereotype. I can list quite a few. There's Loki. One I realised today when I was watching the start of it, Cruella.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I didn't think of Cruella. I actually never saw it, so.
Yeah, Cruella. There's that Orphan movie. I think that's quite well known among the adoption.
I was going to say that adoptee films are usually horror films, or they are like The Blind Side, where there's very much a savior complex, and it's really under this guise of the adoptee should be grateful that they've been rescued, because look at what they could have ended up, right? Or look at how they could have ended up. And it's sort of under this guise that we as the adoptees should be implicitly grateful and like bowing down and not be allowed to feel our feelings. Now, every adoptee story is different, so that's an issue. There are many adoptees who are upset, and there are also, on the other hand, there are many adoptees who are happy, and they're like, yeah, I don't want to know about my biological family, right? So I think the story that you're writing is something that is very needed within media. And you're right, there are a few, but there are not a lot of adoptee stories that are written by adoptees, which is really strange.
Yeah.
And
And
kind of, it's one of the sort of films, shows, whatever the case may be, where it's kind of uncomfortable and it's kind of like, you don't have this experience. Why are you talking about it? Sort of
yeah.
thing.
And like, even like, if it wasn't an adoptee writing it, they should approach, if a non-adoptee wants to, have a character who is adopted, like actually like meet adoptees to understand what it's like, and to not
Right.
stray into these stereotypes and tropes and stuff,
Yeah.
it's really harmful. And I didn't have that much, I think, shows growing up that reflected who I am.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, in the UK, there's this children's show called Tracy Beaker, and
Okay.
she was care experienced, and she grew up in a residential home, in a care home. So that was kind of the only, and I know that's not really my experience, but when it comes to being care experienced, that was kind of the only kind of thing I had to kind of relate with. But yeah, I think, yeah, it's just really difficult when there's not a lot out
Right.
there, to, I
There's
guess.
there's not a lot for there's not a lot for the adoptee to identify with that says, hey, this is my story. I understand how that character feels. So there's not a lot for us to relate to, right? I feel like that's what you're trying to say in so many
Yeah,
words, which I implicitly agree. And the beautiful thing about living now in the modern day is that there's always room for more of those. So if you're an adoptee and you are listening to this, I definitely encourage you to write, bring your ideas to light. We definitely need more shows, more movies, films, web series, anything that will just represent each different, unique journey of the adoptee. We
yeah,
need the adoptee voices to be heard.
yeah, bringing like a nuance perspective, showing that obviously there are negatives and there are positives, and every adoptee experience is different. I think it definitely as well. I think also in different countries as well, because
Yes.
adoption and foster care can be quite different. For example, in the UK, we have no for-profit adoption agencies, I believe. And
Yeah, it's not like that in America.
in America, yeah, that astounds me completely, that money is made off of children.
Basically.
It's awful, and it's still not perfect here. I mean, for example, there are some sort of residential homes and foster stuff in specifically Wales that is for profit, and people making money off of that. And
Right.
well, I'm a part of another group called Voices from Care Cymru. Cymru is Wales in Welsh, and they went to the Welsh Assembly, the government building in Cardiff, because there was a debate going on about sort of for profit foster sort of carers and residential homes. People making money off of that, and yeah, no, it's all about money, isn't it? We live in such a capitalistic society, that it's always about greed.
It's another thing that I point to in films where families, that aspect of adoption is not discussed in adoptee films, in any of them, right? You never see paperwork. You never see the actual sale, quote unquote, of the child, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You never see that sort of interaction. It's just, oh, we adopted you, like now everything's hunky dory, sort of thing, or oh, we adopted you and you're a demon child trying to kill us all. Right? You never see that. That would be a very interesting element to explore.
Yeah, no.
Because there are many adoptees who do feel that adoption in a way is like trafficking, and that's a whole other rabbit hole that we won't go down.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely, I think in like sort of like America and sort of the for profit thing, that's absolutely trafficking. I mean, that is, I just can't believe that's even a thing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is your hope by when you complete your screenplay? What is your hope for those pages? What do you hope for for the future?
Ooh. Well, just like the scripts in general, or like what I want, where.
Well, first for the script, and then for you.
Ooh, that's a really cool question. I think for the script specifically, it will be sort of my hopes. One, obviously, that it's good, hopefully, but I think also that it sort of delves into these things in an authentic way, and I think hopefully I'll be able to do that because I have that lived experience.
Yeah.
And just doing it in a sort of natural and sort of non-preachy way, if you get what I mean. We're not making it too forced, if you get what I mean. Yeah, like being able to like write it, like.
I feel like you just want to show a truth about adoption while acknowledging your own journey.
Yeah. I think
in a way.
Yeah, I think what's important as well, I think when writing, is obviously you can put your own stories and experiences into it, but then it's also good to kind of go off in maybe other directions that's not completely your life, because you don't want to write an auto. What?
Biography.
Yeah, is that the right word?
Autobiography, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
You don't want to write your actual personal story, because number one, that's quite difficult, to do. It's also just really fun to write people that aren't you, if you get what I mean.
Right.
And I'm not, for example, I'm not a foundling. I wasn't abandoned, on a street corner or something,
Right.
But, just bringing attention to, I think, the fact that, trying to find the right word, finding words is so difficult,
That's okay.
I think with this screenplay, I really want to show, I guess, the struggles of not having the full details of your own life. Because, as I mentioned before, I'm a Doctor Who fan, and at the moment in the current season, it's all about adoption, and the companion of the Doctor is an adoptee, and the Doctor's also an adoptee as well. And the companion is a foundling. She was abandoned by a church, and the character, who's 19 when we meet her, she's looking for her birth parents. And I've seen some Doctor Who fans saying, "Oh, it doesn't matter where she comes from. She's got her mother, Carla." And I'm like, it's so easy for non-adoptees to say that it doesn't matter where you come from, because it's never really had to matter to them, because they've grown up knowing, and it's always been like a normal part of their life. Right. As for people like us, it's like
something's missing.
Yeah, and it's like this boxed off sort of aspect to your life, It's kind of very like.
I feel you. It's basically like a void, and there's a lot of emptiness inside of you. You don't know why it's there, but you also don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
Because you don't know everything that you wish you could know.
Yeah, and it's like as you grow up and you're learning more, it's like bit by bit that void is being filled. But yeah, I know it really annoys me when people say, "Oh, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter who Ruby's birth parents are, she doesn't need them." And I'm like, that's not your decision to make. That's ultimately the adoptee's decision.
There's many. So on Twitter, there's many differing opinions, as you say, where people say it doesn't matter where you come from, or you should be okay with where you're at now, sort of thing. Do you know of any other sort of opinions that also are out there, just based off of like a television show, like kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah, it's like it's right there in my mind.
Is it like so what is the sentiment that you're trying to express? Like, what is the sentiment that these people are saying, sort of thing? Is it like does it relate to like where they're from? Does it relate to their family?
Yeah, it's something about the birth family. I'm trying to remember what people have said. Because obviously there's the one thing people were saying, it doesn't matter where you come from. And then there's another thing that I heard people saying, another thing people are saying on Twitter is that, it doesn't matter who Ruby's birth mum is, because she has Carla, her adoptive mum, who's brilliant, by the way. But I'm like, it's not a competition. You can have both your adoptive family and your birth family in your life if you want to,
Yes.
It's not an either. It's really not an either or situation, And I've seen people say in the Christmas special, there's a shot of Ruby's birth mum walking away into the snow down a street, and it's sort of stuck on that shot, and people being like, "Oh, we don't need to know that, We don't need to know." Like, I'm like, that's not your decision to make,
Right.
It's, knowing where you come from is so important, because it helps with formation of identity and knowing who you are. Whether you actually want to meet, your birth family is another question, because I guess it depends on what your situation was, obviously with my situation, a lot of complicated stuff there. But obviously, if, for example, she's a foundling, and for example, that's stuff that happened more sort of during the sort of olden times, if that's the right word, where, society viewed single women as incapable. And yeah, because forced adoption was very common in the 1900s, and, many apologies have had to be issued from governments because of, what's gone on, Yeah.
So I'll end it with this question. So what are your next steps? What's next for James?
Oh, I don't know. I think adoption activism, trying to change how society views us, and also the resources and the support, and just challenging that, because we need the funding. We can't do anything if we don't have the money for that. The government. Many things can be said about the government, but yeah, I think trying to help other adoptees and just changing the landscape for people like us, and also continuing to try and improve my writing skills, and so I can get an agent and start hopefully having my work made. I think I have a long way to go yet, because I know I have a lot of improvements to make. But yeah, I think getting that experience.
You'll get there. You'll definitely get there. It's baby steps, but you'll get there. I like your drive. You got this.
Thank you very much.
So I would like to thank everyone for joining me on this episode of Chats with Kat. A very special thank you to our guest, James. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, and share this episode so that James's voice and story can be heard. Be sure to check out our Patreon page to receive exclusive membership perks and leave us feedback about our episodes. And always remember, someone somewhere is thinking of you. You are not alone.